The overhead lights were too bright, sterile, and unforgiving. Leo Mercer kept his gaze fixed on the patterned linoleum floor until the nurse called his name. He walked into the exam room without a trace of surprise. He had, after all, specifically looked up Dr. Nathan Cole's schedule to book this appointment. Nathan didn't look up from the stainless steel tray he was arranging. Leo put on his best wounded expression, his voice softening to a plea. He asked if the doctor could be gentle. Nathan didn't seem affected by the tone, simply stating that a local anesthetic would be used. Leo insisted he had a tolerance, that the numbing agents never worked on him, trying to lace the words with a familiar, coaxing quality. For a moment, Nathan's hands stilled, his lips pressing into a thin line before he agreed to try. The instruction to open up was curt. The cold metal of the mouth mirror pressed against his gum, positioned too aggressively. Leo complained it was uncomfortable, that it was pressing too hard. Nathan paused, his eyes flicking up briefly before he readjusted the instrument. Encouraged, Leo kept talking, his words muffled by the tools. He whined about his jaw getting sore, about the persistent prodding being too much. Nathan remained focused, his movements precise and clinical. Leo had to admit the man was handsome when concentrated, the white coat emphasizing a sharp, composed elegance. The promised numbness was, as predicted, entirely absent. He could feel every scrape and poke. Seeking a distraction, and noting the empty room, he lifted his foot and let it brush against Nathan's calf. The hand in his mouth jerked. Nathan's gaze snapped to his, a clear in his eyes. He muttered a low threat about extracting every tooth if the behavior continued. Leo pretended not to understand, repeating how much it hurt and asking for mercy. Nathan's voice was ice. He stated flatly that they were no longer together. The next instant, a sharp, deep pain lanced through Leo's jaw, the metallic tang of blood flooding his tongue. Tears sprang to his eyes unbidden. A nurse entered with a clipboard, her expression shifting to concern at the sight of his tears. Nathan explained dryly about the anesthetic tolerance before pressing an ice pack into Leo's hand. As Nathan's fingers came close, a reckless impulse took over. Leo leaned forward and bit down on the back of his hand. A hissed command to let go made him release immediately. He scrambled back, offering a weak, apologetic smile. When Nathan withdrew his hand, a faint, shimmering strand briefly connected it to Leo's mouth. The skin was marked with a clear crescent of teeth and a sheen of moisture. The sight sent a flush of heat up Leo's neck. Thankfully, the nurse was distracted. She joked about how tears were simpler for the young, before asking for his details for her forms. His speech was too slurred to understand. Nathan, washing his hands at the sink, sighed and took the clipboard, writing swiftly. The nurse remarked on them knowing each other. Nathan called him the kid from next door. Leo lingered in the office after the nurse left. Nathan acted as if he were invisible, head bent over paperwork. Unwrapping a piece of hard candy the nurse had given him, Leo was stopped by a sharp look and a reminder about his fresh extraction. He sheepishly rewrapped it. The memory of the pain was enough. With a sound of irritation, Nathan stood and shrugged off his coat. Assuming he was being dismissed, Leo hurried after him through the parking garage, asking where he was going and if he wanted to get dinner. The refusal was blunt. Leo followed anyway, only to see Nathan approach a smiling man leaning against a car. The easy, familiar way they interacted made Leo's stomach drop. He hadn't considered this possibility. He quickened his pace, softening his voice to call out for his brother. Nathan finally turned. The other man, introduced as Chase, eyed Leo with open curiosity. Leo wanted to claim his title, but seeing Nathan's averted gaze, he echoed the earlier lie, calling himself Nathan's younger brother. The tension around Nathan seemed to tighten. Chase suggested a bar. Leo knew Nathan hated loud, crowded places, so he was stunned by the easy agreement. He immediately invited himself along. At the bar, the dim lighting and pulsing music confirmed Leo's suspicions about the place. Chase kept filling his glass, a challenge in his eyes. The alcohol burned the wound in his gum. He was about to drink a third when the glass was plucked from his hand. Nathan told Chase he couldn't drink after the procedure. As Chase protested, Nathan took the glass and finished the drink himself. Leo stared, his heart pounding. They had both touched the same spot. Nathan rarely drank. Chase commented on the oddity as Nathan poured another. In the shadowy corner, the low light caught the curve of Nathan's mouth, still damp from the drink. Leo's mind drifted back through years of shared history. Their parents as friends, a childhood spent trailing after the older boy. A gradual, confusing shift in his own feelings that had taken root in the dark and grown undeniable. By the time they left, Nathan was unsteady. Chase offered to drive him, but Leo insisted, calling a friend for backup. The night air was cool. Nathan seemed to regain some clarity, enough to walk, though his steps wavered. Under the streetlights, their elongated shadows merged into one. Leo asked for his address, offering his own place as an alternative. After a long, searching look, Nathan gave it. In the taxi, Nathan leaned against the window, eyes closed, a picture of distance. Leo didn't dare move closer. Upstairs, as Nathan fumbled with his keys, Leo called his name. When Nathan turned, Leo moved in, aiming for his lips. A single finger pressed against Leo's mouth, stopping him cold. Nathan's voice was quiet, final. He said Leo had crossed a line. He pushed him back, stating he was too old for games, that he couldn't afford to be played with anymore. The door shut. Leo stood frozen in the hallway. The overhead bulb flickered and died, plunging him into absolute blackness. His breath hitched, a familiar, clawing panic rising in his chest. He stumbled toward the stairwell, fighting to get a pill bottle from his pocket. He dry swallowed too, collapsing against the cold concrete wall as his body trembled. It was too dark. He fumbled for his phone, turning on the flashlight. The small pool of light was a lifeline. Much later, walking out into the lit bustle of the city, he felt his nerves finally unclench. His phone rang. His mother's voice was frantic, asking if he was having another episode. He tried to reassure her with a hoarse whisper. He could hear her in the background, yelling at his father, blaming him for the conversion therapy facility, shouting that she didn't care who her son loved. The memory of that place, the darkness, the isolation, the pain closed in. He cut the call gently. At home, he saw texts from his friend, Lucas. The messages complained about Chase, who had apparently become overwhelmingly clingy and was now crashed at Lucas's apartment. Leo sighed. Chase's tactics were transparent. Sleep brought a vivid dream of college, of using an internship as an excuse to live in Nathan's apartment. He remembered the careful distance, the charged silence, and finally, on his birthday, the courage from cheap beer to confess. The feel of Nathan's hand over his eyes, the soft sigh, and then the kiss. The sensation of reaching out in the dream and finding only empty air jolted him awake. The kitchen light was on, as always. He couldn't sleep in the dark anymore. He took a few pieces of candy from the jar on the counter, the sugar a temporary balm. He'd need to see his therapist again. At the clinic the next day, distracted by his phone, he bumped into someone. Scalding coffee soaked through his shirt, searing his back. As he stood stunned, a furious voice spoke behind him. Nathan, his expression stormy, dragged him to an exam room. He ordered Leo to take off his shirt. Leo made a weak joke that Nathan shut down. Knowing resistance was futile, Leo complied, wincing as the fabric pulled from the burns. Nathan was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke to ask why he was at the clinic, his voice sounded rough. Leo said it was just a follow-up. Then Nathan asked about the other marks, the old scars and silvery lines that covered his back and sides. Leo mumbled something about an old fight. Nathan didn't believe him. To Leo's surprise, Nathan agreed to lunch. He led them to a bustling barbecue joint. Nathan frowned, noting the spices wouldn't be good for his mouth or his burn. Leo insisted. Nathan gave in, but when the food came, Leo saw with dismay that Nathan had ordered everything plain, without any of the signature sauces. Halfway through the meal, the restaurant's lights flickered and went out. The world seemed to telescope, the noise becoming a distant roar. He only came back to himself when he felt a stinging pain in his finger and heard Nathan's voice, calm and close, telling him to stop biting. Nathan had pulled him into an embrace, a hand steady on his lower back, murmuring that he was there. Leo buried his face against Nathan's neck, finally whispering that he was scared. Nathan drove him home, but Leo asked to go to Nathan's place instead, worried about his unsecured medication. Nathan studied him for a moment before changing direction. The moment they entered, a blur of white fur launched itself at Leo. A rambunctious Samoyed nearly knocked him over. Nathan pulled the dog back, scolding it. Leo asked when he got a dog. Nathan mentioned finding it when he moved, that it just stuck around. Leo murmured that it was hard to imagine anyone abandoning such a creature. Nathan's reply that it happened anyway hung heavily between them. Later, Nathan confronted him, his voice low and strained. He wanted the truth about the scars, about the panic in the restaurant. Leo stayed silent, unwilling to lay the burden of his father's betrayal and the trauma of the clinic at Nathan's feet. Nathan finally stood, saying he'd find out on his own, and left for the hospital. Alone with the dog, Leo buried his face in its fur. He had messed up again. Days later, his father called. The conversation was halting, filled with pauses. His father finally asked if his feelings for Nathan were unchanged. Leo said they were permanent. A heavy silence followed before his father, his voice tentative, invited him home for a birthday dinner. The night of the dinner, Leo found Nathan already in the kitchen, helping his mother. The meal passed with a fragile normalcy. As they were leaving, his mother pulled them both aside, her eyes glistening. She told Nathan to take care of her boy, and told Leo she had known everything, had heard the arguments outside her hospital room long ago. She said she supported him, always. Nathan drove back in a tense silence. Once inside Leo's apartment, he went straight to the bedroom. The pill bottles were on the nightstand in plain view. Nathan pulled him into a crushing embrace. He said Leo's father had told him everything. He asked, his voice breaking, if it still hurt. Leo, tears finally spilling over, said it did, and that he needed him. He joked weakly that Nathan was a terrible actor, that his eyes had given him away the night he said they were over. Nathan cupped his face, his own eyes red-rimmed. He said the rules had changed, that from now on he held the reins. Leo asked for how long. The kiss was his answer, and the word, breathed against his lips, was always.